This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Is Andrew Berry doing a good job? We seem to argue to death about, is Kevin Stefanski doing a good job? And while Kevin's record can speak for itself, it's a pretty good record, stands up there with a lot of coaches in the NFL. We debate it nonstop. But see, general managers, it's a little bit of a different job to evaluate. You can't just look at win-loss record, right? Because that's the same exact thing that you do with your coaches. You want to look at talent in, talent out. Who did you trade for? Who did you lose along the way? Who did you sign for? All of those things. So that's what I want to discuss today. I want to dive into Andrew Berry's draft history. I want to dive into Andrew Berry's free agency history. I want to dive into Andrew Berry's trade history, give him a grade in 4 categories: draft, trades, free agency, big swings, free agency, small swings, and put that all on a report card and evaluate whether the Browns should give Andrew Berry an extension. Because as much as we talked about this Kevin Stefanski extension, Andrew Berry's is probably going to be the one that has to come up first, because that's to come directly from ownership. And then Andrew can extend Kevin if he wishes. But that's going to be one of the more important things when we're talking about stability. So how does Andrew Berry stack up? Well, let's talk about the draft. And to me, it's surprising that Andrew Berry, especially before this year, got so much criticism about his ability to draft when I felt like it was so unwarranted. And it seems like people have obsessed over like the fact that he hasn't had a Pro Bowler, which that ended this year. JOK made the Pro Bowl, so he's drafted a Pro Bowler. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of people got really caught up in that stat and didn't really look at the whole picture with him, because I think if you do look at the whole picture and you look at it within context, Andrew's done a hell of a job on drafting guys so far. Now, the Browns have drafted 1 Pro Bowler and 7 total players that are worthy of extensions, that will be extended, get an extension by a team, whether it be the Browns or somebody else. So that's what I mean when I say extension level players. Since 2020, the Browns have had 12 top 100 picks, 2 of those in the first round, 2 of those in the second round. The rest of those picks are third round picks. And of all their draft picks, the Browns have 8 guys who they drafted that are no longer on the team. One of those guys, Anthony Schwartz, is a top 100 pick. Everybody else is like 5th, 6th round. Perion Winfrey, Cade York. So that is Andrew Berry's draft history. And look, those numbers don't really mean much on their own, so I'm going to compare them to some of the other teams in the AFC North. We all think of Baltimore as a team that can draft well, and they can draft well. Now, the Browns' extension percentage since 2020 was 58%. The Baltimore Ravens' extension percentage since 2020, 57%. Now, the Ravens have drafted more Pro Bowlers. They have 3 compared to Cleveland's 1, and they have more extension level players. They have 8 compared to Cleveland's 7. They've also had more top 100 picks. The Browns had 12, and the Ravens have 14. Of those 14 top 100, and this is where it starts to become understandable that the Ravens have more Pro Bowl players than the Browns, is of those 14 top 100 picks, 6 of those 14 picks were in the first round, and 2 of those 14 picks were in the second round. So in total, 8 of the 14 top 100 picks were in the first or second round, compared to the Browns, who have 4 of their 12 top 100 picks in the first or second round. So the Ravens were definitely shooting a little bit closer to the target here, and they were able to get it. The Ravens also have 7 players who are no longer on their team that was drafted by them since 2020. The highest profile player that they have is a 3rd round pick, Tyree Phillips, who's no longer on their team and it plays for the New York Giants. So that's Baltimore. I would say all things considered, the Browns stack up pretty well to them. Let's continue throughout the North. The Pittsburgh Steelers have 1 Pro Bowler of all the guys that they have selected. They have a 45% extension percentage of their draft picks since 2020. They had 11 top 100 picks, 3 of those in the first round, 4 of those in the second, so a total of 7 in the first 2 rounds of the draft. Keep in mind the Browns have had, 4 in the first 2 rounds. Now, that's not something that Andrew Berry did not participate in. The reason we don't have those picks are because of trades that Andrew Berry has made. So it's not like he is blameless in that, but 1 first round pick, 1 Pro Bowler for Pittsburgh, 5 extension level players, a 45% hit percentage for them. They have cut 9 players that they've drafted since 2020. Well, not cut, but don't have these guys on the team. And Chase Claypool, a 2nd round pick 40, is their highest profile guy that they got rid of, that they drafted recently. And we see how Chase Claypool is playing now. It was actually a good idea to trade him. So they would get a plus grade if we were talking about trades. Let's talk about Cincinnati. They have the worst hit percentage of extension level players of anybody in the AFC North at 42%. They've had 12 top 100 picks, 2 of those picks in the top 10, 2 late first round picks, and 4 in the second. So a total of 8 of their 12 top 100 picks have happened in the first 2 rounds, and 2 of those were in the top 10. So the premium of the picks were pretty good. They have 2 Pro Bowl players, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. They have 5 extension level guys, and of their draft picks since 2020, 7 of them are gone. And that is the picture around the North. So there's some context to tell you not just about the job that Andrew Berry's doing, but how that compares to what his peers are doing and what is the most competitive division of football teams on earth. He stacks up well, arguably, if you give the context, even better than a lot of teams in here. I think, me personally, for his drafting, I would have to give him a pretty high mark. The mark that I decided to give him is a B. He hasn't hit the home runs that you want him to hit, like the big swings in the draft. You would love Jet Wills to be more than just an extension level player. You would love for him to be a Pro Bowl player, especially if he's going to be your 1 top 10 pick that you've had in the last 4 years. Greg Newsome is a good pick. He's an extension level player, but you would love for that pick to hit a little bit higher. I think that's been the one criticism of Andrew. His big swings have not had the hit rate that some of his swings in the mid to late rounds have had. Like a DeJuan Jones late, most of the best players that the Browns have gotten have been outside the first round. Grant Delpit, which was you could say it was a big swing. I would say JOK was another big swing that they took that worked out. So it's not like he's terrible at these big swings. It's just that, he's not as consistent as he is in other areas. That's why I would give him a B. He's pretty good. There's still room for improvement. The Browns are still going to continue to fill this team with pretty good talent, despite the fact that they haven't had very many premium picks. So, he's shooting further away from the board than most of his other peers in the AFC North by a significant margin, but he's still hitting at as high as a rate as Baltimore in the top 100, which I think is significant. So, I think Andrew's done a fine job there as a drafter. Now let's talk about trades. There's been quite a bit of trades that Andrew has made. I'm not going to review every single one of them. I'm just going to point out some notable ones that he traded for. Let's see. Do I want to start at the top or the beginning? Let's start from the beginning. So the first trade of note that I have listed was when he traded up for JOK. that was a good choice. I think the Browns didn't lose anything. That was a fine choice. The 6th-round pick that he traded for Deion Jones, I thought that was an even call. Deion was fine for that team. Baker Mayfield for a 5th, and potentially a 4th. Now, this needs the context before people spam the comment section. I know people will. That this was the trade with the Panthers. So you judge it based on what the Panthers got out of Baker Mayfield. And the Browns certainly got more than a 5th-round value, got more value out of a 5th-round pick than the Panthers got out of Baker Mayfield that year. They ended up cutting him in the middle of the season. So given that context, I'm just calling that trade even. Troy Hill, they traded him for a 5th, which ended up turning into DTR. And DTR ended up being somebody who helped you win a game this year against Pittsburgh. I would call that trade a win for Andrew Berry. The Deshaun Watson trade, it's to be determined. It's not looking great for Andrew. He's only played 11 games in the last couple of years. But the one thing that keeps this in to be determined territory is that the team is still really good. And all it takes is one good year for Deshaun Watson to justify that trade, right? The level that this team's at, all it takes is one good year. If I thought this were a situation where this Browns team had a pretty low ceiling and Deshaun Watson was underperforming so far throughout this trade, I would feel comfortable calling it. But since this team has a really high ceiling and we haven't really seen enough of Deshaun Watson to make a real call about it one way or the other, just 11 games, 6 consecutive at most since he's came back, it's hard to just call it a failure already in my eyes, if I'm being fair about it, especially since the team has so much potential. Because if this was a team with a limited ceiling and Deshaun was underperforming, you could call it because it's only going to get so far. But if Deshaun gets on this team, plays well, and then they go to the AFC Championship game next year or even the Super Bowl, which I think is very much on the cards for this Cleveland Browns team. I mean, look how far they got with all the injuries that they had in 2023. Then that trade obviously turns into a success if you get to an AFC Championship game with him. So it's kind of hard to call it. I think, if he gets injured again next year and the Browns are kind of crumbling at that point, then we can call it. But as far as right now, it gets one more year before I'm ready to call it one way or the other. Amari Cooper for a 6th and a 5th for Amari Cooper and a 6th-round pick. It's obviously a great trade. It's one of his best trades, one of the best trades in franchise history. So that's obviously really good here. 2 5ths for Zadarius Smith. I thought this was going to be a home run trade. This is just the even trade. I thought Zadarius Smith gave you the value for 2 5th-round picks, but nothing more than that. It was kind of a disappointing year for Zadarius. So disappointing, I think you can get him for a discount, and I think he'll actually be good if you get him for a discount next year, because I think he just had a bad luck year for real. You traded Donovan Peoples-Jones for a 6. Donovan Peoples-Jones then ended up contributing for the Detroit Lions, and I felt like you got better punt returning out of James Prochet than you were getting out of Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I call that trade a win. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones had like 75 yards receiving, so he didn't miss anything there. And I thought you got better punt returning from James Prochet once you moved on from him. A 7th-round pick. You traded a 7th-round pick for Dustin Hopkins, one of the best trades that the Browns made all year. So obviously 2 thumbs up for that one. Josh Dobbs plus a 7th for a 5th-round pick. I think we can all say that was a good trade. You got a free 5th-round pick out of your 3rd-string quarterback. The big concern there was, if you lose somebody or if you trade your backup quarterback, what happens if Deshaun Watson gets hurt? Well, we know Deshaun Watson got hurt. They won 11 games. And they got a 5th-round pick for the backup quarterback. So that was a good trade. I know people still argue that. I don't really think that's an arguable point anymore. If your whole point about trading Josh Dobbs was, man, this team could fall off a cliff if you trade your backup quarterback and you have a rookie in there. Well, the team didn't fall off a cliff, and the starting quarterback played 5 games. So they won 11 games. They made the playoffs. So how can we argue the Josh Dobbs point? I think that died once Joe Flacco showed up, to be honest with you. Pick 42 for Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman. This one's to be determined, but similar to Watt's one, it's not looking great. Cedric Tillman, for whatever reason, can't figure out where he's supposed to be on the field. And look, he has like 3 months to figure that out before veteran quarterbacks to start giving up on him. And Elijah Moore, I thought he played within expectation. I really want to see what Elijah does next year. I think the hype for Elijah got a little bit higher for others than it got for me. I kind of kept my hype for Elijah Moore at around 600 to 800 yards, and he was within that for me. At the bottom end of it. So we'll see what he does next year. But 42, that's a steep price. It's a second round pick. And it's not looking great, but I'll give it another year because Tillman's a rookie and Elijah Moore was at least in his yard target for me. So when it comes to trades, I give Andrew Berry a B here. I think Andrew has done a fine job here with the trades. Obviously, the Watson trade is going to swing it, right? If the Watson trade turns out to be a failure, and Deshaun either gets hurt next year or underwhelmed significantly to the point where this team can't get to 11 or 12 wins or get past the first or second round in the playoffs, then this starts to swing towards C, D, territory. But right now, with that being a non-factor, and how I grade it, it's to be determined. I think the body of work for the trades are pretty good. You give it a B here. Free agents. Now, I think this is the area where you can have the most criticism of Andrew Berry, because when it comes to big free agents, I don't think he's hit as much as he's wanted to. Austin Hooper was one of the big first free agents that they signed. I don't think that one worked out the way that they planned. You ended up spending money on David Njoku, who I thought obviously excelled anything that you hoped with Austin Hooper. Jack Conklin, that was a good signing. I don't think the second extension they gave him was a great idea, but that first signing of Jack Conklin, great idea. That's a good signing. They lost Christian Kirksey that year. Nobody cared. So that's fine, letting Christian Kirksey walk. Jadeveon Clowney for 2021 was a great signing. He had 9 sacks, one of his best career years. Troy Hill and John Johnson III didn't work out. Those are 2 big swings, didn't work out. And then I think what's even worse here is that you lost Larry Ogunjobi and you lost Sheldon Richardson, and boy, you felt it. You really felt it. You felt it for a couple of years losing those 2 guys. Not a great year for Andrew Berry here. Thought bringing in Clowney was great, but all these other moves just not the banner year when it comes to these big moves, big decisions in free agency. And then this year, 2023, I thought he had a much better year. The big names here, Juan Thornhill, who's been fine. Dalvin Tomlinson, who I think has been pretty damn good. And Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, who's pretty good too. So I think that those are 3 big swings that worked out. But, the hit rate here for these big swings just aren't where you want them to be. I think he's done an excellent job maintaining free agents, if that's part of this, right? So you're talking about the Wyatt Teller extension, which was a good idea, the David Njoku extension, the Grant Delpit extension, the Nick Chubb extension, all the players that they've kept on the team is what's really holding up this section of it for me. I'm giving him a C+ in big free agency signings. I think he's done much better, or has a much better track record in these small free agency signings, because it's just like a list of players that they signed kind of on a whim, like not on a whim, but they weren't the big targets of the season, right? Your Anthony Walkers, your Jacoby Brissetts, your Josh Dobbs, your Ethan Posicks, your Rodney McLeods, your Shelby Harris's, Maurice Hurst's, Joe Flacco's, that really, really worked out for this team. And if I'm giving him a grade when it comes to small free agencies signings, I give him an A+ on that one. So where do I stand with Andrew when it comes to draft? I gave him a B. When it comes to trades, I gave him a B. When it comes to free agency, I gave him, big free agency signings, so the big money signings, C+. I think he's above average, but I don't think he is great in that area. When it comes to free agency, the small signings, A. I think he's one of the best in the NFL when it comes to that small tinkering. And he's really good at that when it comes to the draft as well. So when it comes to like getting the most out of a little, Andrew's one of the best. When it comes to getting the most out of some of these big swings, that's where they have a little bit of room for improvement, right? Every big signing that they've had, you've left being like, man, I wish we could have got more out of that, or I wish we could get more out of those big swings, right? The Elijah Moore trades of the world, the Deshaun Watson trades of the world, right? It's probably the two most expensive trades that he's had, and those are still to be determined, and you would like to feel great about those trades, and you don't feel great about those trades. On the flip side of it, when it comes to getting the most out of a little, right, you talk about the Amari Cooper trade, you talk about the Dustin Hopkins trade, you can talk about a bunch of trades, trading up for JOK. Like, those are things that, not the most expensive trades in the world, but a really nice result that you got out of it. So while I think that Andrew does a really good job at that value shopping, when he's value shopping, he's one of the best. Nobody can value shop like Andrew Berry, I think, in the NFL. But where I think Andrew needs to get better, and this is just GMs improve like players and coaches, right? There's room for improvement. This is not me saying that he has a fatal flaw and he's done. But where I do think Andrew can get better at is those big swings, right? When he goes out and gets a big purchase, there's sometimes some buyer remorse associated with these big purchases that I would like for him to get a better handle on, right? The Deshaun Watson trade, I would love to feel better about that than we do right now. Same thing with the Elijah Moore move. I would love to feel better about that than I do right now. Even some signings, Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin was a pretty good one at the time. But even like you re-signed Jadeveon, you re-signed Jack, and it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't feel great about that anymore. And even like we can bring it into the draft, right? When he takes some of these big swings in the draft, like a JOK trade works out, but then you draft Jed Wills, and Jed Wills is not bad, but you would love to feel better about Jed Wills. So not a bad job at it. That's why he gets a C+, but still like room for improvement. And overall, I think that's my whole thing with Andrew Berry. And I think that that's somebody that you want to keep. Yes, he has areas in which he can improve, but he's a human being. He should have areas in which he can improve. And I think that those areas are easier, right? I think it's harder to find somebody who could value shop than somebody who can, shop for those big ticket items. And I think he'll get better at that the more experience he has at doing it. But given the situation that the Browns are in, he's been perfect for them. And I think he'll be perfect for them going forward. I think Andrew's a really good GM. Overall, he gets a B grade. I think he's one of the better GMs in the AFC North and in the AFC, most certainly. And he's working his way to being one of the better GMs in the NFL. If he could just get those big purchases right, he would be top tier in my mind. But that's the one thing keeping him from it. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.